When I crossed the line into 60, something changed in a way I could never ignore. The house grew quieter. Yes. But the silence I felt was not about missing voices or empty rooms. It was a silence that pressed against my chest. A silence that carried the weight of memory and of questions too long postponed. In that silence, I realized the years ahead of me were fewer than the years behind. And with that realization came a piercing question. What is worth carrying into these final chapters of my life? And what must I finally set down? For many men, my age, the answer is not companionship at any cost. It is peace. Peace becomes the rarest jewel. After decades of compromise, after bending ourselves into shapes that pleased others, we reach a point where sacrificing our inner calm is no longer a price we can pay. I once believed love required enduring storms. At 60, I know better. The storms erode more than patience. They erode health, clarity, and dignity. They steal the little time we have left. I can remember lying awake at night, listening to the hum of the refrigerator while the house settled into uneasy sleep. My body was tired, but my mind replayed arguments like a broken tape. The stress raised my blood pressure. The tension hollowed out my joy. That is when it hit me. The enemy was not solitude. It was conflict. And once a man knows that truth, he cannot unknow it. He cannot pretend companionship is worth it if it comes tied to turmoil. This is why many men walk away. Not from love itself, but from love that costs too much. We have seen the patterns. We have carried the scars. We know what happens when respect vanishes, when promises fail, when we try to heal what will not be healed. Age brings a ruthless clarity. Time is too short to repeat the same mistakes. Walking away is not surrender. It is wisdom paid for, in blood and regret. And it is not just memory that drives us. It is also the hunger for authenticity. At 60, I no longer want to wear a mask. I no longer want to impress or play games or keep up appearances at holiday dinners while my soul withers. I want conversations that matter. I want mornings that begin in quiet gratitude, not in fear of the next argument. Loneliness, though heavy, is easier to carry than pretense. It does not poison the air. It does not demand I betray myself. Some call that coldness. They see a man step away and think he is broken. But let me tell you, it is not weakness to walk alone. It is courage. Courage to admit that peace is not a luxury anymore. It is survival. To face life and death with uncompromising honesty. To say my final years belong to me is the most radical act of freedom a man can take. In America, you see it everywhere if you look closely. The neighbor who spends his mornings in the backyard garden instead of arguing in a kitchen. The retired teacher who writes his memoir instead of fighting through another failed relationship. The grandfather who finds more joy in fishing with his grandson than in pretending to fix a marriage that died years ago. These men are not bitter. They are reclaiming themselves. And I will tell you something else. Selfishness looks different when you are 60. It is no longer about taking from others. It is about protecting what little energy you have left. You guard it like a flame in the wind. You give it to the people and the passions that nourish you. Your family, your music, your faith, your health. Things that do not ask you to bleed out your spirit just to keep them alive. That is not selfishness. That is survival with dignity. So when you see an older man walking away, do not mistake him for broken. He has lived long enough to know that not all love is love. Some of it is control. Some of it is chaos. And some of it is just loneliness disguised. The truth he has found is simple. If love does not bring peace, it is not worth the cost. At 60, we stop gambling with our sanity. We choose silence, authenticity, and the strength to walk alone if necessary. That choice is not despair. It is hope. Hope that even in solitude, there is richness. Hope that the years ahead, however few, can be lived with clarity and freedom. Hope that by refusing to bow to turmoil, we honor not just ourselves, but the life we have fought so hard to keep. The silence that comes with age is not empty. It carries the weight of memory. By the time a man reaches his 60s, he has lived through decades of compromise. Decades of giving more than he had. Of staying in situations long after the warmth was gone. And those years leave scars. Not the kind you see on the skin, but scars etched deep into memory, betrayals that never quite faded, arguments that still echo, disappointments that hardened into caution. Younger people cannot always understand this. They still believe every wound can be healed by trying harder, by loving stronger, but older men know better. They know the cost of ignoring warning signs. They know how much energy is lost in rebuilding what has collapsed. And at this age, energy is the one thing you cannot waste. I think of a friend of mine, Tom, who went through a divorce at 62. It was not just a breakup. It was the dismantling of a whole life. Splitting retirement accounts. Moving out of the home he built with his own hands. Explaining to grown children why things fell apart. The legal fees. The emotional strain. The endless conversations that left him hollow. It took years off his life. When I saw him again after it was over, he told me, "I would rather spend my days alone in a small apartment than go through that kind of war again." His words stayed with me, because that is what so many older men feel. Not bitterness, but exhaustion. Not fear, but clarity. And that clarity points us towards something we once overlooked. Peace. When you are young, you convince yourself that passion requires drama, that fighting is proof of love, that chaos is part of the bargain. But by 60, you have seen too many sleepless nights. It's too many mornings where stress poisons the day before it even begins. You have learned that the true enemy of well-being is not solitude, but conflict. A toxic relationship can drain a man faster than illness. It can steal years more effectively than any disease. Which is why solitude, though heavy, begins to feel like a form of healing. It is not that we stop craving connection. Of course we do, but the kind of connection we want at this stage is different. We do not want masks or games or roles we no longer fit. We want conversations where silence is comfortable, where truth is spoken without fear. We want authenticity. That word becomes sacred after 60, because for decades we wore masks. Provider, husband, father, protector, and while those roles carried meaning, they also consumed us. When the weight of those roles begins to fall away, we suddenly see the man in the mirror differently. For the first time, life belongs to us again, and we hunger to live it honestly, even if it means stepping away from those who cannot walk with us in truth. That hunger for authenticity shows up in small ways. It is in the man who stops forcing himself into social gatherings that drain him. It is in the retired mechanic who spends his mornings writing poetry instead of pretending to fit into a marriage that died years ago. It is in the grandfather who finds more joy in coaching Little League than in fighting to keep a relationship afloat. These are not acts of bitterness. They are acts of reclamation, choosing to honor what is left instead of wasting it in battles already lost. And then there is health. Mortality makes its presence known in the 60s. The body stiffens. Sleep is harder to come by. Doctor visits become more frequent. You begin to understand that vitality is limited, and every ounce matters. A toxic relationship does not just create emotional strain. It accelerates physical decline. Stress raises blood pressure, weakens the immune system, robs you of strength. By contrast, solitude preserves energy. A quiet walk through a neighborhood park, a calm morning with coffee on the porch. These moments are not small. They are survival. They are medicine that no doctor can prescribe. And at this age, wasting energy on chaos is no longer tolerable. The margin of waste has vanished. That is why many men, when faced with the choice, step away. Not because they hate companionship, but because they know companionship without shared peace is hollow. They have reached a point where survival means protecting inner calm at all costs. And that protection is not coldness. It is wisdom. It is saying my time is finite. My energy is precious. And I will not trade them for drama. Some people still do not understand. They see an older man living alone and assume he is lonely, defeated. But often, the truth is the opposite. Many of us rediscover passions we left behind. We pick up guitars we had not touched in decades. We volunteer at churches, schools, or community centers. We take road trips with no destination. We write, paint, build. I reflect. These pursuits give us a sense of purpose deeper than a broken relationship ever could. And in those moments, Solitude is not emptiness. It is richness. It is a space where we can breathe without being drained. There is a powerful line that I keep close to my heart. If love does not serve peace, it is not love. That line has become my compass. It is the climax of this long journey of realization. Love that destroys peace is not love. It is control. It is chaos. And once you know that, you can no longer ignore it. You would rather walk alone in truth than stay bound in a lie. So when men after 60 walk away, I understand this. It is not despair that drives them. It is courage. Courage to face the years ahead with honesty. Courage to protect the sanctuary of their minds. Courage to put dignity and peace above appearances. And in that choice, they discover something rare, and the strength to walk their own path without apology. There comes a point in a man's later years when the question of identity feels heavier than it ever has before. For decades, I was defined by roles: husband, father, provider, a worker. Roles that demanded sacrifice, endurance, compromise, and while they carried meaning, they also chipped away at pieces of me that I did not notice were missing until much later. When the weight of those roles began to ease, when the children had grown, and the job no longer demanded every ounce of strength, I was left staring at myself in the mirror. The man looking back was not the same man who once believed love was worth any cost. He was different. He was asking different questions. And the loudest question of all was this: who am I when the noise stops? That question is frightening at first. It strips away excuses. You cannot hide behind a title or a duty. You are left with yourself. And for many men, including myself, that realization ignites a hunger for authenticity, a hunger to live the last chapters of life without apology. We begin to see pretense for what it is, a performance that drains the soul. We begin to recognize that wearing masks to keep others comfortable is no longer bearable. And so, when a relationship threatens that authenticity, when it demands that we play a role that suffocates us, we step back, not because we despise the person beside us, but because we refuse to betray the truth of who we are. The climax of this journey arrives in one simple truth: if love does not serve peace, it is not love. If it strips away dignity, it is not love. If it asks you to abandon yourself, it is not love. That realization changes everything. It is a pivot point. The moment when silence becomes more valuable than company. When solitude feels less frightening than compromise. For me, it felt like standing at a crossroads. On one side was the familiar path of enduring, pretending, staying. On the other side was the unknown, the road of walking alone. And for the first time in my life, I chose the unknown. That choice did not come easily. I remember nights pacing the living room, the clock ticking louder than my own heartbeat. I remember the ache of imagining holidays spent without a partner at the table. I remember the weight of friends asking questions, of neighbors whispering, of family not understanding. But the alternative, the thought of spending my final years in constant conflict, was unbearable. The fear of loneliness paled in comparison to the certainty of chaos. And so I chose peace, even if it meant solitude. Some might call this surrender. I call it courage. It takes courage to face the truth without dressing it up. It takes courage to admit that not every relationship can be saved. It takes courage to walk away from the familiar in search of something sacred, even if that sacred thing is simply a quiet morning without fear. At 60, courage is not climbing mountains or chasing new adventures. Courage is looking at your life with ruthless honesty and choosing peace over noise. I have seen other men make this same choice. A retired firefighter who spends his mornings fishing instead of arguing. A widower who decided not to remarry because he values the calm of his routines. A former businessman who moved to a small town and spends his days mentoring kids rather than enduring a relationship that no longer fits. These men are not bitter. They are free. They discovered that love without peace is bondage, and they refuse to wear chains in the final chapters of their lives. There is a power in reclaiming your own story. When you stop living for validation, when you stop bending to expectations, you begin to feel something you have not felt in years. You feel alive. Not in the reckless way of youth, but in the steady way of someone who knows exactly what matters. A cup of tea on a quiet porch matters. A phone call with your daughter matters. A walk through autumn leaves matters. None of these things require sacrificing your sanity. None of them demand you play a role that kills your spirit. This is the climax because it is the turning point. Once you understand that peace is not optional, everything changes. Every decision is filtered through that lens. Does this bring me peace? Or does it take it away? If it takes it away, the answer is no. That clarity is not coldness. It is wisdom. It is the hard-earned prize of scars and years. And it is the foundation for the rest of life. I often think about the men who do not make this choice. The ones who stay, who endure, who allow conflict to eat away at them. You can see it in their faces. The weariness, the resignation. They look older than their years. They laugh less. Their shoulders slump under invisible weight. I do not judge them, because I was once one of them. But I know now that walking away does not mean abandoning love. It means refusing to accept a version of love that destroys. It means choosing a higher form of love, one that begins with honoring yourself. So when I finally stepped away, it was not with anger. It was not with bitterness. It was with a deep breath and a quiet prayer. It was with gratitude for what had been, and courage for what was ahead. And in that moment, I understood that the climax of my story was not about leaving someone else behind. It was about finally returning to myself. As the years move forward, time feels different. What once seemed endless now feels finite. And that realization changes everything. Instead of asking, what can I gain? The question becomes, what is worth my remaining time? This is not bitterness. It is clarity. At 60, every day matters. Every choice carries weight. And with that weight comes the determination to invest only in what preserves peace and dignity. I think about the mornings that greet me now. The sun rising over quiet streets. The sound of birds in the yard. The steam rising from a cup of coffee. These moments may look simple, but they are not empty. They are rich because they carry no conflict. They are full because they leave room for gratitude. I never thought silence could be a blessing. Yet here I am, finding more meaning in stillness than I ever did in arguments that lasted until dawn. It is in this stillness that I finally feel alive. Many men discover the same truth. A neighbor of mine, retired from the postal service, spends his afternoons restoring an old truck. He tells me the peace he feels in that garage is deeper than anything he felt during years of fighting to keep a broken relationship alive. Another friend volunteers at a local shelter, saying that giving his time to people who truly need it is more fulfilling than chasing approval from someone who never respected him. These stories are not about giving up on love. They are about redefining it. Love is not proven by how much chaos you can survive. Love is proven by how much peace it protects. And sometimes, peace creates space for new connections. Not the rushed, demanding relationships of youth, but gentler bonds built on truth. I have seen men and women in their 60s and 70s find companionship that feels lighter, freer, because both carry wisdom. Both understand the value of calm. Both know that time is short and not to be wasted. These relationships are not about saving each other. They are about sharing peace. And that is a different kind of love. One that heals instead of drains. Resolution also comes from recognizing that solitude itself is not failure. In America, we are taught to fear being alone. We are told that success means partnership, that happiness requires another by your side. But the truth is more complex. Solitude can be sacred. Solitude can be a sanctuary. It can be the place where you rediscover passions left behind, where you hear your own voice again after decades of silence. A man who chooses solitude is not broken. He is brave enough to stand with himself and call it enough. There are nights when I walk through my neighborhood as the sun sets. The sky painted in streaks of red and gold. The air cools. The world slows. And I feel no ache for what I left behind. Instead, I feel gratitude for what remains. The freedom to breathe without fear of conflict. The strength to guard my peace. The courage to walk my own path. This is not despair. This is resolution. And in that resolution, there is joy. The greatest shift that comes with age is not about losing strength, but about gaining perspective. You stop chasing noise. You stop proving yourself to people who were never listening. You stop pouring energy into places that do not return it. Instead, you start investing in what matters most. health, family, purpose, peace. These are the treasures worth protecting in the final chapters. These are the gifts that make solitude rich instead of empty. I often think about younger men, the ones still convinced that drama and love are inseparable. I wish I could tell them that passion without peace is a fire that burns everything down. I wish I could tell them that real strength is not in holding on, but in letting go, when letting go protects your soul. Maybe they will learn it in their own time, through their own scars. But for those of us who have lived long enough, we already know. And that knowledge is freedom. So if you see an older man walking alone, do not pity him. Do not assume he has been defeated. Understand that he has made a choice. He has chosen truth over pretense, calm over conflict, peace over chaos. That choice is not weakness. It is the highest form of courage. It is the decision to honor what little time remains, to live it without apology, to guard it with everything he has left. For me, the resolution is simple. If love does not bring peace, it is not love. If companionship requires sacrificing dignity, it is not worth the cost. And if solitude offers the chance to live with clarity, then solitude is not loneliness. It is liberation. This is how I will spend the rest of my days. Not chasing, not pretending, but resting in the quiet strength of peace. That is my resolution. That is my truth. And in that truth, I have found something I searched for my entire life. Home.